Hello, this is Niswander. We're going to talk about trade agreements. A little bit of history. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was signed into law in the 1990s by then President Bill Clinton. Now, to be fair, that bill was put together by both Republicans and Democrats. But what we have seen since is the loss of millions of jobs here in the United States domestically. Now, fast forward to the present. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. Is it another trade agreement? I've heard people say that it is NAFTA on steroids. My guest is Jack Bennett. He's a Los Angeles businessman, works in the legal profession. Jack, thank you for being on the NOWMAN show.
Nice to be here. Can't wait to tell you what's on my mind.
So, let's get right into this. What is the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
It is a so-called free trade agreement encompassing over 40% of the global economy. It is an agreement with over 12 countries, including the United States, and most of the countries, all the countries to be specific, are around the Pacific Ocean, Pacific Rim countries. Included in this agreement is the United States, obviously, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Vietnam, to mention a few.
Why is the TPP a really bad idea?
Well, the bad idea is too general. This is a so-called free trade agreement that will be stacked on top of 20 current trade agreements that the United States is engaged in.
Wow.
Number one. Number two, it will be further stacked, as you stated, on top of NAFTA. NAFTA was a corporate litmus test, like you said, that passed in 1995 by Bill Clinton. Today, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a 2,000-page, 29-chapter trade agreement that no one except the corporations that are massively funding it and pushing it, and just a few select U.S. trade representatives know about. The United States Congress, however, is charged by the Constitution, Article 13, that they must agree on trade with the United States and the rest of the world.
Now, how many pages did you say
Over
this?
2,000. Right now, it's probably about 2,600 pages.
How much of this is an actual trade agreement?
Well, we don't know exactly.
I see.
It's done in secrecy. It started in 2004, 2005 with, I believe, Malaysia. And the United States was not the originator of this. The United States was watching from a distance. But recently, since the emergence of China, the United States wanted to counterbalance that, and they took over and hijacked this agreement.
So it's been kept a secret from the public, and even members of Congress, right, no one's really actually read the entire document and knows that much about it, and they're going to be voting on this thing.
That's exactly correct. As of August of this year, the United States Senate approved the Obama administration on a procedure called Fast Track. And Fast Track, or the Trade Promotion Authority, TPA, is merely to say yes or no on one of the greatest agreements that will affect the United States for hundreds of years to come.
Now, when you say affect us for hundreds of years to come, what do you mean by that?
What I mean precisely is you have to recall after World War II, say in the early 50s, the United States supplied over 90% of the products and services the world needed. Today, 2015, we're barely touching 13%. What that means for what I call super corporations, they have actually elevated themselves away from being what I call true American enterprises, and they become global enterprises, and they are seeking any environment, any place in the world to produce their products or services. So although they benefited from the sweat and tears of what America stands for, they really don't even care about America. What they care is for absolute super corporate profit per minute.
So essentially, at its peak, you were saying, how much was the United States producing in this country of the goods and services?
Of the goods and services, the world's goods and services in the early 1950s, at least 90%.
Wow, wow. That would explain the prosperity that we experienced in this country for a long time.
And that's okay. However, in today's dynamic environment, we are now seeing that Malaysia can produce 5,000 highly skilled engineers, just like the United States. But if you're operating a global operation and you are deciding whether to pay American engineers $150,000 plus benefits, and if you could run the machine in Malaysia, which they're preparing, for $30,000 per engineer, it's simple math.
Yes, yes. So where do you see that taking our economy?
Down the drain, turbocharge immediately once the signage of this agreement becomes law.
Now, when does this come up again for a vote? Do we know that?
They haven't nailed down the actual vote in Congress yet. They are still completing some of the chapters. Some of the chapters means they're fine-tuning who will get what, which corporation will get what, how will they get it, and what is their defense.
Now, as far as the agreement is concerned, it's my understanding that Edward Snowden is the person that revealed that there was much more to this agreement than trade, and that by far the majority of it had to do with international corporate business. Is that correct?
That is correct. He laid out on the internet snippets, parts of the agreement, but no one can say and look into the eye of the camera and said, I read the entire agreement, I know what it consists, I know the impact. No one in the United States of America, unless you're specifically designated as a special lawyer for the super corporations or for the elite United States trade representative agents. They are not allowing a huge, huge agreement to be reviewed, analyzed, critically reviewed by all the participants. For example, the unions of America who have fought so hard for American rights are not allowed to review the document. It is insane to allow this to go forward without complete scrutiny, complete analysis of all the vested interests. It's only the corporations, and it's only the specialized lawyers, and only the U.S. trade representatives are allowed to review the document.
And I think it's interesting that in these days when we hear so much about the need for transparency, that this is probably the one thing that would affect most people, and that exists in the entire world right now and has the least amount of transparency. Would you agree with that?
It will gut the American economy. It will gut the American workers. Could you imagine in Los Angeles when most of the people will not have jobs? They will be shipped out. Could you imagine in New York and Miami, their jobs now will be shipped out throughout the Pacific? We're listening to the debates. We're analyzing who's yelling at each other, but we're not going to look at an agreement that will affect whether you have a job or not. If you don't have a job, you don't live. If you don't have a job, you will incite crime. If you don't have a job, you can't get medicine for your kids. Not having a job, this is the greatest single assault on American sovereignty we have known on all of our history of America. This is like World War II multiplied by 3. This is the greatest national security threat, and no one is talking about it. No one is bringing it in front. There's no critical analysis. We should be analyzing every single page, every single item, and have people aggressively review it. And there's nothing.
Well, what should we do then instead of the TPP?
Well, the TPP could be okay, but it will only be okayed by super corporations. And that's the problem. They say, and they call it the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Boy, that sounds so nice.
Yeah.
Free trade agreement. There's no such thing as a free trade agreement. The workers of America and the citizens of America will be paying for it for generations to come. It's like any other contract. Could you imagine signing a contract and not being a participant in the contract, just sign it, yes or no? And this contract is whether you will have bread on the table, whether you would have medicine, whether you would have a house, whether you could take care of your kids when they're in the hospital. This is a devastating contract not to analyze it. We are crazy not to review every single word, every single paragraph, every single page, point by point, and challenge everybody on it. Challenge the corporations, challenge the unions, challenge the U.S. trade delegates, challenge everybody who's going to make a huge profit from it.
And there was a Princeton study, actually, that was released in 2014, where there were over 180 policies that were signed into law between I believe it was 1981 or 82 and 2001. In other words, the Patriot Act was probably the last one they reviewed. And they came to the conclusion, through a question. The question was, is the United States still a democracy? Is it now an oligarchy, or is it a combination of the two? And the conclusion of these two gentlemen at Princeton was that the United States is a 100% oligarchy. What are your final thoughts on that?
Well, remember, the definition of an oligarchy is almost like the collusion between corporate interests and state interests. However, I think you have to look deeper and more refined at the subject, and the subject is who is benefiting from this agreement. The American workers will not benefit. The citizens of the United States will not benefit. Super international corporations will benefit almost to a point of $1 billion per minute in their industry. So although you could have democracy in small areas of the economy, like I said before, in the restaurant arena, but in bigger economies, medicine, intellectual property rights, materials that be farmed out, they're going abroad, they're going away because they can make more money. If you could make $1 billion per minute in Malaysia and you make $1 billion a week in the United States, what will the super corporations do? They automatically will go to Malaysia. However, the problem is they benefited from the United States for the last 200 years. They benefited from all the folks we lost in Iraq, all the folks we lost in Vietnam. They benefited from World War II. They benefited from the Korea War, where we established our institutions, our universities, our rule of law, our economies. They benefit, they got strong, they got super strong, they had super lawyers, super accountants, super analysis, and now in 2015 they're deciding we can make $1 billion a minute over there. So it's actually un-American of what they're doing.
$1 billion
a minute.
A minute.
It's insane.
That's hard to even fathom.
And no one wants to talk about it because the narrative is not to talk about it because it's profitable not to talk about it.
That's
just
right.
Sign on it.
That's right.
It's crazy not to review a contract and just sign on it. Shame on the congressmen, shame on the senators, and shame on the lawyers that are helping set this up. They don't care.
Thank you very much, Jack, for
You're welcome.
Giving us a brief overview of what the Trans-Pacific Partnership is about. This is Niswander, and you're watching The NOWMAN Show. Hello, this is Niswander, and this is The NOWMAN Show. We're going to be talking about job creation. A little bit of history first. Franklin Delano Roosevelt created what's called the New Deal in the 1930s, which were over 100 bills. At least several of those created millions of jobs. When there were millions of people out of work, there were a lot of hungry people on the streets. And fast forward to the current day, 2006, 2007, okay? We had a similar financial crisis that began. Not everyone has seen recovery, and there's no talk about public job creation. So, Professor Richard Wolff, who is an economist at New University in New York City, actually believes that one of the solutions to the economic crisis is to create what he calls worker self-directed enterprises, or worker co-ops. Here's a clip with Professor Wolff.
In America, we have something called the Small Business Administration. It was developed many, many years ago because small businesses felt it wasn't a level playing field, that the big business had all kinds of advantages that a small business doesn't have. So we set up the Small Business Administration to give small businesses a leg up. Cheaper credit, technical assistance, all kinds of government contracts and so forth. We do the same thing with minority-owned business. We've done it with women-owned business, so on. Well, why the hell not a cooperatively operated business? Why don't we have a support of the government? Why don't we give the American people, think about it, freedom of choice when you go to work to choose between working in a top-down, undemocratic capitalist enterprise or a worker-owned, worker-operated democratic enterprise. You want to give people freedom of choice? Give them that choice. In order for them to have that choice, you got to create all these businesses so they can choose to work in them. And imagine as a consumer, you could buy a product that said on the back not made in Guatemala or free trade coffee, but it said on the back whether it was made in a cooperative enterprise or a N capitalist enterprise, where N stands for nasty, okay? So you would have the choice as a consumer, who do you want to support? What do you want to see in your society? More of the one kind or more of the other kind? Think about it this way. You can see that if this were presented the right way to American audiences, this is something that they could support and get behind because it taps into history, feelings, ideas, values.
So, I am here with Somerset Waters, who is the co-founder of Pacific Electric Worker Co-op. Welcome to the NOWMAN Show.
Hey, Dan. How's it going?
Your company is organized as a worker co-op, but what exactly does Pacific Electric do?
So Pacific Electric Co-op has responded to the current energy demands by providing our clients, residential and commercial, with their own electrician that acts as their own energy agent. So whether it's changing out a switch, sizing a battery bank, or getting rebates back from your utility, our electricians are trustworthy worker owners that understand the high stakes involved in energy investments and energy management. And so our investment into this kind of model of shop this is how we're looking forward, as well as the quality of our work.
So essentially, your particular operation combines both electrical and solar, correct?
Correct.
So what type of customers do you serve then?
So just like any other shop, everyone uses power. We try to really honor our warranties and stay strict to our community by keeping a narrower range of communities that we serve. So only about 50 miles round from where our shop is, and like by downtown Los Angeles. We do a lot of light commercial and solar installations, and we also have an energy maintenance firm or division as well. And so you can see both of the strengths of our shops. For example, a lot of the internal tools that we have to develop have to do with understanding our consensus decision-making, skill building, as well as conflict resolution. And so those go really well when it comes into dealing with contracts. When it comes to maintenance, a lot of times you want that flexibility with a client. So that shows like our tools in dealing and flexibility. And then just because, typical electrical work, it's a strict hierarchy because there's a lot at stake here. And so you're dealing with power. And so that's where you can see us function really well and the strict hierarchy that exists in the apprentice and journeyman role.
Well, you're talking about hierarchy and also the structure.
Yeah.
How do you define a worker co-op?
Sure. I would say a worker co-op is if you go into a shop, you see the secretary there, you see the apprentice, you see the journeyman. If the shop's owned by them, that's a worker co-op. You want the shop not only be owned by them, but it's the shop that serves them as well, right? So it's not just a backroom investor, right?
Exactly. So let's say the owners basically are the workers, right?
Yeah.
And they make all the important decisions.
That's right.
They don't leave it to a board of directors that's separate from the complete operations of day-to-day life and operations of the workplace.
Sure. I mean, you have to have trust. You have to be able to committee things up. But every other Wednesday, we're still a small shop, under 20 people. Every other Wednesday, we come in, and when it comes to the governance of the way we're going to run this shop, we're all there being careful and making these strategic decisions together so that a lot of things are considered.
So in a typical work day or week, what do you yourself do personally?
I'm in client relations nowadays mainly,
Yeah.
And facilitating sales. My goal is to be able to have multiple people that are doing sales so that I can get my tools back on and be able to get out in the field sometimes too.
So, but as an electrician, do you still do the functions of an electrician?
Less and less right now. What's really cool about worker co-ops is that you are allowed to have that flexibility. You don't just have to be this one-trick pony that you often see. That's what you have to be in a corporation. Everyone just has their box, their cubicle. Within a worker co-op, it's really functional to have an understanding of like a lot of different roles. So it'll be great. Sometimes I'll be working project management. Then you know what? I'll just be another journeyman out in the field.
So it depends on, it goes project by project
Yeah,
and how that operates.
it does.
That's very cool. So, the White House and Congress, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the show, they've been pretty silent on a public jobs program, unlike, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Even though I know for a fact there are tens of millions of people right now, as we speak, that are looking for a decent paying job. And there's not even any discussion about what can be done to help these people. Economics professor Richard Wolff, as we saw also earlier in the show, he believes that greater support for worker co-ops would actually create many jobs. What are your thoughts about that?
So luckily, the Federal Workforce Investment Board, as well as the Los Angeles County, has actually been championing recreation of apprenticeships across not just trades, but in all these other new industries, which I think is super great. Not everyone needs to go 4 years through college and make that huge investment and then be banking on that to get a job. There's a lot more of a hands-on education that you get when you have this on-the-job training through an apprenticeship model. You also get to see and work hand in hand with the people that have been there and have that experience. You see the full roundedness of the people that have been in that trade. It's not just a teacher that you see for 30 minutes and they're gone.
Yes, exactly.
The worker co-op, the reason why it's such a great base is the fact that when we have a shop, it's our shop. It's where we live, it's where we work, it's staying there. It's not going overseas. That's a solid tax base.
Exactly.
And so not only that, we have these decision making that's done collectively. We make sure everyone's highly skilled in this decision making so that we can really function. Why? It's high stakes for us. This is our livelihood. This is what feeds our families.
Right.
And so because of that, we're going to be more likely to succeed than just a small mom and pop because we have way more infrastructure and we can rely on each other to support us. If someone's sick, someone else can fill in.
And so you were talking earlier about consensus. I mean, that's an important way of making decisions as a group because obviously when you have, let's say in the case of Pacific Electric, you have 20 people, correct, that are making all the important decisions. So you have to have an apparatus in place to know how to get to a conclusion on when any issue comes up of any kind, right? So that's what consensus is really about, right?
Yeah, we have a 6-month vetting period for journeymen. We have a 1-year apprentice vetting period for apprentices because during that time, this is when you're becoming trained in governance. And so if you show that you can put that forward and you have that maturity, then you can join in, and that's where you can become an owner at that point. And that way, we can make sure that all our decision making is done with strategic understanding, and people realize how high stakes things can be.
Now, how do you see the role of worker co-ops on a larger scale? Do you see this taking off, this idea getting wide appeal very quickly? What's your take on it?
Hugely, absolutely. Like for example, after Baltimore had its big rebellion, people were really mad. I really hope, and we've seen a lot of worker co-ops I hope they flourish. They've been coming out of Baltimore particularly.
Why is that?
You know why? When people are frustrated, they want solutions. And who better than to create the solutions themselves? What's really great is that not only do you have these young people that are learning a trade, they're learning governance as well.
Yes, yes.
What
yes.
do people, already, what do people really treasure in this country? Well, it's money. If you want to really control it, control your own destiny that way. And so if you actually understand governance as well as this trade that you're picking up, you are going to be a much stronger citizen, especially if people are worried and saying, oh, the schools are failing us. Well, here's an opportunity where we can have each other, teaching each other how to function and how to work together. These are arguments that are resolved and that we keep moving forward with. And so this is a really great model for the country to really better itself.
I totally agree myself personally, having studied it to some extent as well, and being inspired even by you as well as Professor Wolf in this subject. In conclusion, let's wrap this up. What can our audience do to help raise awareness of the co-ops and working together in this kind of an environment?
Sure, I would check out the Federation for Worker Co-ops. And
what is this?
It's called the Federation for Worker Co-ops.
Is it like a .org or something like that? Or?
Oh, that's a good question. Just Google it.
Google it. Federation of Worker Co-ops.
It is. It's the Federation for Worker Co-ops, and they're a wonderful institution. They support us. They help us with our bylaws.
Excellent.
Help us with our governance and everything. And you can also just give us a call. You can provide our information and give us a shout, and we'll answer all your questions. There's not as much of a resource that we can just give you. There's a lot of questions. It's a complex topic.
Yes,
give
it
us
is.
A shout.
It is, and the whole purpose of doing this segment is to introduce people to the idea and go into some detail about how it functions, so that they're even aware of it. A lot of people, when I talk to them about worker co-ops, what's that? And I really like the way Richard Wolff, the professor, calls it worker self-directed enterprises, sure. Because a lot of people get confused about what a co-op is because, I know what a food co-op is. I participate in that every week, and they bring vegetables to my front door, whatever, or yeah. I go to a community garden. And
or REI.
Right, or REI, yeah. Correct. You're absolutely right. So this makes it more specific, as you were saying. It's more complex.
And it's neat, it's not just people just creating a new shop. There's a lot of aging out baby boomers that are, they want to get out of the operations, and they're looking for a way that's, maybe sell to your workers. And there's a lot of financial facilitators that'll just help you out with this. Concerned Capital, the Working World, and they will actually help this out. And then there's a great model right there.
Thank you so much. Somerset Waters from Pacific Electric. Thank you for being on the NOWMAN show.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. This is Niswander.
The past is gone, the future is yet to come. It's now, right now.